Ready to make a difference in the lives of fathers and their families? The Show Up Dad podcast empowers the next generation of dads to lead with confidence and love. Your support and our amazing partners help us to create lasting impact. Consider donating $50, $100, or $250 to provide a dad with essential resources. And speaking of incredible partners, let us introduce you to Tallman Equipment. Since 1952, Tallman Equipment has been standing taller than the rest of competition in lineman tools. They provide top quality equipment and solutions for linemen, ensuring safety and efficiency on the job. If you're in need of reliable and durable tools, look no further than Tallman Equipment. Also, don't forget to check out our online shop at theshowupshop.myshopify.com for high quality products that support our cause. From t-shirts and hoodies, stickers, and even children's clothes, we have something for everyone. Not only will we be showing your support for our cause, but you'll also be getting a high quality product that you'll love. To learn more about what we do, visit theshowupdadfoundation.org. You can also find lineman tools at tallmanequipment.com. Thank you for your generosity, and let's empower dads and build stronger families. Welcome back to the Show Up Dad podcast, where we delve into the inspiring stories of fathers who excel not only in their professional lives, but also in their roles as devoted family men. Today, we have an exciting episode lined up for you as we welcome Chad Preston to the show. Chad is a man of dedication and resilience. He's married to his wonderful wife, Sherri, for an impressive 25 years. Chad understands the importance of building a strong foundation for a lasting relationship. Together, they have raised 3 remarkable adult children, which is a testament to their commitment and love. In this special episode, we will have the privilege of exploring Chad's experiences as a lineman. We'll dive into the challenges he's faced and the lessons he has learned and the rewards that come with this demanding profession. From braving extreme weather conditions to maintaining a strong work-life balance, Chad's story will inspire you to persevere in the face of adversity and cherish the moments that truly matter. Moreover, Chad's insights as a dedicated father will undoubtedly touch your heart. He will share his wisdom on raising children, nurturing a loving partnership, and finding harmony between work and family life. So join us as we embark on this captivating journey with Chad Preston, the line worker extraordinary and devoted family man. Welcome to our show, brother.
Hi, David. How are you?
Good, man. Finally get you on here.
No kidding. It's been a little rough, but we got her done.
Well, I just want to open up, Chad. You just telling us a little bit about your story, man. If you can share your journey as a lineman and how you decided to pursue this profession, if you don't mind, brother.
You know, I was a young man at college wasn't for me, and construction and working outside was really up my alleyway. And I did a little bit of everything in the construction industry as far as building houses, pretty much every aspect of that. And just, I don't know, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my thing. And I had a family friend that was in line work, and they kind of helped point me in the way and the direction that I needed to go to get in the apprenticeship and how to go about that. And really didn't know 100% what I was getting into, but I knew the nuts and bolts of it, you know. And when I showed up for my apprenticeship interview, I was completely overdressed, trying to, dress to impress, and kind of looked at me funny and said, "Well, you're a little overdressed," but I guess the rest is all history. Must not have been all bad to be overdressed.
That's funny that you said that, because I when we have interviews at CalNev JATC, you'll see, all these people lined up, right, to get their interview, to get their shot. And everybody will be dressed like they're ready to go to work or whatever, you know what I mean? And you'll have a couple of guys that stand out and they're in full on suits.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at them up and down, and I'm like, man, you here for a court date or what? You know what I mean? It's just funny, you know what I mean? But yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So you decided to get into this profession, right? You didn't know what you're getting into, like, how was it like starting out? Like, was it like overwhelming at first or what? Like,
well, I got, back in 1996 when I got started in the apprenticeship program, we didn't have climbing schools.
Okay.
You just started on the job, and they sent me to the middle of Nebraska on November the 11th of 1996 to work on a 115 line for Ellie Myers. And man, foreman asked me, he said, "You got your tools?" And I produced a handful of hand tools, and I mean, screwdrivers with interchangeable bits. And he's like, "Well, you don't need that." And he's throwing them out in the cornfield, you know. And he said, "There's a set of climbing tools over there in the bin of my truck." He said, "Go grab them. I'm going to have you go up and clip them statics." And I'd never been up a pole. I had no idea. I tried to put my hooks on backwards. He said, "You going to climb the inside of a barrel, son?" You know, I didn't know what was going on. And it took a while to get up there, but we got her done. And over the course of the next few months, I figured it out pretty well.
Man, that's funny how those old guys were, huh?
Overwhelming, to say the least, in a whole different world than we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
This kinder, gentler society that we're in.
Man, I remember I was working with this guy out of Arizona, 769, and he asked me for some channel locks. I had no idea. I had some, the cheapest tools I could find, you know what I mean, from Harbor Freight, and I handed him my Chinese-made channel locks, and he grabbed them, he looked at him, and he threw them as far as he could. And he's like, "What are those?" And I was like, "Those are my tools, man. What are you doing?" And he's like, "Man, you will show up tomorrow with some American-made channel lock 430s, and he's like, "Oh, don't ever show up to the job without American-made tools." I was like, "Wow, okay," and that was the start of it.
Right.
Those old guys didn't mess around for sure.
No.
Yeah.
No, it was a whole different world.
Now
it was good.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see that that's still needed today? Like that's something that's missing?
Like the hardness?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's got to be a certain amount of hardness.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think we're selling these kids short when we're training them. They just, even a good dad's hard on his son once in a while when he needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely have that pressure that you need to apply, right?
Right.
I always tell the fathers that I deal with that, if you apply too much pressure in the wrong amounts, you're going to snap them, right? And I use the analogy of a branch. Okay, you have this 2-inch branch, you know what I mean, or sapling in the backyard, right? It's about 2 years old, whatever, and it's bent at a 45 degree. It's growing in your backyard, right? What do? You got to straighten it out. It's going to grow crooked, right? If you were to go up to that sucker and just like really apply pressure on and straighten it out, the chances are you're going to break it. You're going to cause more damage than good, right?
Yep.
But what you need to do is apply gentle pressure over time so that they will straighten out into the way you need them to go. And that's exactly how I see parenting. That's exactly how I even see with our apprentices. And that's exactly how God the Father deals with us. He doesn't snap us. He doesn't break us. He gives us what we can handle, but he's going to apply pressure when we're being disobedient or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. His word promises us that he will never put more on us than we can handle. Mm-hmm. And he's not going to apply too much pressure, but he's going to apply the pressure needed to get the reaction that he deserves and needs from us.
Absolutely. I see it even like with my own children. Like we're always, we're called to discipline as fathers, right? That's our job.
Absolutely.
Right? And when we discipline, it's just training. That's all discipline means. We have to train our children. And the time we apply pressure or punishment, right? Because discipline is not punishment, it's training. Okay.
Absolutely.
2 different things. The time I have to apply punishment is when they don't adhere to the discipline. It's when they fight against the rules, when they go against what we're trying to do in the training, right? And then that's when you got to apply that pressure. And that's when I tell my kids, all life stops right there and then, man. All your devices, all your free time, everything gone. And you're still going to do your discipline. You're still going to do it. You know what I mean? So it's up to you, abide by the pressure or not. You know what I mean?
Over the years, I've broke a lot of horses and I've trained a lot of Labrador Retrievers, and it's the same concept. Training kids and training your animals. You've got to apply enough pressure to get the action or reaction that you are desiring, and as soon as they give it, you have to release that pressure. It's a give and take thing. It's not constant pressure all the time. You just got to give them a little bit at a time to get the reaction and the change that you need.
Yeah, for sure. You got to apply it and then know when to have the discernment to pull back on it.
Absolutely.
You're doing it, because the Bible clearly states that we have the ability to exasperate our children.
That's right.
And I've seen it. I'm guilty of it myself. When I constantly am pouring on pressure to yield the result out of my son, my youngest, right? Because he's a strong-willed child. And when I'm constantly putting pressure on him to where I just see his little heart break, dude, oh man, it's heartbreaking to see that, because he'll literally just be like, what do you want me to do, Dad? You know what I mean? Oh man, it's my wife at that point has to step in and let me know, because God's giving our wives the ability to have a heart, right? To feel after our children. We don't as
Absolutely.
men, you know what I mean? Because we're incomplete in that aspect, right?
Right.
So my wife, as my partner, has to step in and be like, look, you're giving him too much pressure. You need to relax. Look what you're doing to your kids. And it's my job to be able to see that and see her as a helper to me, to be able to respond to her and be like, you know what, you're absolutely right. Let me pull back a little bit. I'm being too harsh, so it all works hand in hand,
You might not want to hear it from her at the moment, but you probably need to listen.
Absolutely. Like I said, God has given our wives that heart, a mother's heart.
Absolutely.
And something we don't have.
No, not at all.
No, for sure. Now, I wanted to ask you, how do you manage the physical demands and potential risks associated with being a lineman while also prioritizing your family's well-being? I know that's a big thing right now.
It's tough. It's not an easy. There's no there's no real answer that is good for everybody across the board. There's a fine line there, of that work and home, and you've got to keep things separate, and home at home and work at work. But when you're on the job, man, you've got to keep that mind there. You got to keep your head in the ball game all the time, because if you're not, it's your family that's going to pay for that. It's not you're going to pay for it physically, but they're going to pay for it for the rest of their lives. Potentially, if something happens to Dad or whatever that looks like. I've told guys for a long time, many years, if the reason we have safety rules and we do all those things to keep ourselves safe is not just necessarily only for us. It's for our families too. And if you're going to break those rules and be, that guy that's just haphazard and doing whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it, you might as well go home and walk in the door and tell your wife and your kids that you don't love them and you don't care anything about them, because that's what you're saying without saying the words.
Yeah, no, there's a man, and I'm sure you remember him, Randy. I can't even pronounce his name, Feltler or something like that. Anyhow, he has a video where he says, "I felt comfortable," right? And they always show it. And he was a lineman at the utility. He got hurt at the utility where I worked at a long time ago, and he blew off his hand, right? And he goes and talks about how he took a shortcut. He felt comfortable. Okay. Right. Guy went face to ground, on a pad mount transformer. Anyhow, long story short, it cost him his arm, cost him his livelihood, everything, you know what I mean? His wife had to scrub his body to debride all that burn and char all the time, just because your body, when you get burnt like that, starts constricting and it heals. It needs to heal from the inside out. And when you have that scab over like that, it starts healing from the outside in, and that's wrong. Right. So you got to keep debriding, which is scrubbing and stuff like that. And he goes on to talk about how it's one of the most horrendous, horrible things you can go through, right? Excruciating pain, and how he had to watch his wife tear up every time she would scrub him, you know,
Absolutely.
and how agonizing it was for him and for her too, to be able to see him in that much pain, you know. And I say this story because you're absolutely right, Chad. When we take shortcuts, we take things for granted at work, right? It's not just us who's going to pay for it. It's our family who we're doing this job for, you
You
know,
know,
and
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
no,
We
go ahead.
don't, I mean, we don't, we're not just going to work just for ourselves and for our own manlyhood and our own masculinity. We're going there to provide for those families that we
Mm-hmm.
love and care about, that we have at home, that's waiting for us to come home every night. And if we're not willing to keep ourselves safe for them, then what are we really doing this for?
Mm-hmm. Have you ever been in a situation where you actually um, had to call like an all stop or anything like that, where you're like, wait, hold on, guys, we need to rethink this. You know what I mean? I don't want anybody to get hurt or anything like
I
that.
mean, nothing like major seriously bad, but I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
happened a lot of times, on the job, in the middle of a job, if things aren't going the way that we feel like they should be, or we're not headed in the direction that we need to be. Sometimes, yeah, you've got to call the guys down, or just even if you're the lineman in the air, say, "Hey, I'm not comfortable with this. We need to talk this over." Absolutely. And that's one thing that in this day and time, I feel
Mhm.
guys are afraid to do that. They're afraid of repercussions of stopping the job sometimes, and they don't realize, we've got to be our brother's keeper, and we've got to be willing to step into that position as a
Mhm.
journeyman lineman, not just a journeyman lineman, whether you're working as a foreman, even the apprentices. I mean, if you're not comfortable, say something.
Mhm.
By all means, say something. Let's get on the same page, because we don't need to be trying to work off of different pages. It's not going to
Absolutely.
end well.
No, it's not. Why do you think they're afraid to speak up? What, in your opinion?
Uh, Goes back to that kinder, gentler world we were talking about a while ago.
Mhm.
That everybody's afraid of upsetting someone or making somebody mad, or
Mhm.
there's no room for that. Not in my opinion in this trade.
Mhm.
It's I've made the comment many times, talking to my wife at different times. It's sometimes it's literally a matter of life and death. Whether
Yeah.
we realize it or not, we as linemen, we've learned to put that in the back of our minds and not look at it that way anymore. But
Mhm.
man, that's got to be in the forefront. We are dealing with life and death situations many
Mhm.
times on a daily basis.
Mm. That's one thing I've seen we've been doing a lot of. One of my boss, a good friend of mine, Eugene. That's one thing he's been implementing every Tuesday. You know, we have this big tailboard for all the apprentices when they show up and everything. And he gets up and we talk, and he makes the students stand up and talk and use their outside voice, right?
Right.
That's one thing I always try to encourage my apprentices as well to do, and even with my children to do, is be able to speak up and use your voice, you know, because no one can read your mind,
Right.
you know, and you got to have that confidence to be able to stand up and be like, hey, man, this is what happened. This is what's going on. This is, you know, what we're seeing, you know, even with our children, even down to the baby that I have, you know, my little son, you know, I want him to be able to speak up if something is happening at his school that we are not aware of, you know?
Absolutely. You know that one of the things that I did probably 10 or 12 years ago in our
Mhm.
safety meetings, I implemented at the end of every safety meeting, I would have the apprentices go around the room, and each apprentice had to come up with just a little safety topic, whether it was, and just say a few words,
Mhm.
wear your seat belts, check the butt of your poles before you start up the pole, whatever it was, check your adjacent poles, all the things that we tend to do in the subconscious as a lineman, but they're things that we need to think about mentally and outwardly. Because I've also said for many, many years, it's as much as a journeyman lineman, it's as much our job to teach these apprentices as it is to build a job. And if we're
Mhm.
not teaching them these things, and we're not teaching them audibly to check these things to keep themselves safe so they do go home at night the same way they showed up in the morning, we're failing. And I've seen a big failure over the last almost 30 years in this trade of that teaching mentality. We were taught when I went through the apprenticeship by a lot harder group of linemen, and the lessons you learned sometimes hurt, physically hurt. You know, they might wrap your knuckles for touching the wrong thing with a crescent wrench or whatever that was.
Yeah.
but you know what? It made us a better lineman for it. We learned, I'm not going to do that again because that's stinking hurt. It's just that simple. But going back to that, you know, just getting them, like you said, to think and use their voice, their audible voice, to voice those things. You know, maybe hopefully one day down the road, those same apprentices will be on the job as a journeyman lineman and say, hey, kid, I need you to go check that next pole down. Check that arm. Those braces look a little funny. That kid may have not looked down there or thought about looking down there to check it out. But that lineman, by speaking up the way he was taught to do as an apprentice, just taught that kid something, you know, and it might save them from having an accident too, for whatever it is.
So. And it's all training too, Chad, because you figure if you tell them to go do something and they go do it, right? And they come back and they report to you. Now you just taught that kid two things. You taught him responsibility and you taught him to be able, that you need to be able to count on him.
Right.
You know, trust, right? Trust is a big deal. You know, I had a discussion the other day with another lineman. We discussed about trust, right? And how trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets, right?
Absolutely. And
with that being said, you could substitute trust with truth. So if you're truthful and you're telling the truth, if you're truthful enough to say, hey man, I've never done this before. You know what I mean? Versus, oh, I'm a journeyman lineman, I'll wing it, I'll figure it out. Right. You know what I'm saying? You're going to start building that trust up with your crew. You're going to start building that trust up with the people around you, you know, and it's the same thing even with our children, right?
Absolutely.
You know, our children are going to come to us if they trust us with these issues. If they don't trust you, they're not going to come to you.
You're right. 100%.
You know, so.
But the same goes, our children have got to be able to trust us too and know that when we tell them something, that's the way it's going to be. Yes. You know, and that goes back to that same thing we were talking about earlier, the discipline thing. You know, we've got to, as a parent, just like as a lineman with our apprentices, as a parent with our children, we've got to be able to, when we tell them something, they have to know that dad means it.
Yeah.
If you tell them something and they don't do it and you don't do anything about it, you've shot yourself in the foot. You have no credibility. And you've got to stand behind your words, you know, with our children more than anything.
Absolutely. We got to have that consistency. That's the big key, you know, and when we're gone and mama needs to fill into that role as disciplinary, because discipline doesn't stop when the father leaves. Yes, it is our job to create the disciplines and carry out the disciplines. But when daddy's gone, our wives need to pull up into that role and carry out that. It cannot be laxed. It's got to be consistent throughout, you know? And I think that right there is undermining everything we are trying to do. You know, whether they're doing it on purpose or not, most women aren't doing it on purpose. They just, you know, are not built that way, right? Per se. And that's why they have their husbands. But it needs to be consistent across the board.
Sherri and I've talked about that so many times, you know, I can't tell them one thing and then be gone and you have a whole different set of rules or whatever, you know, and that's a hard part too of this trade is, and being gone and working on the road and whatever, you know, mama. And there's nothing more important than you and mama being on the same page. You've got to be on the same page together on one accord. Or those children will never, they won't respect you. And when you're there, they won't respect her. And and you both lose credibility. If you're not on the same page, you both lose credibility. And any major decision that we ever had to go through with our kids, that it was a matter of much discussion and prayer. We had to make sure that we were in agreement and on one accord, because we did not want, that for our kids.
No, you definitely got to show that united front, because kids are master manipulators, whether they know they're doing it or not. You know what I mean? They'll go and manipulate, and it's kind of funny to see, and you just got to have the wisdom to know, hey, man, we got to be consistent. And dad said no. Guess what? Mama's going to carry it out too.
And I've seen so many guys come to me and just in discussion, man, I don't get it. We don't agree on parenting. We don't agree on this. I don't know what to do. And you got to pray together. Pray about it. Put it in God's hands and let Him tell you what He wants you to do about it. Let Him show you what His plan is for you to parent your children. And so many times I think as men, we want to step into that role and be in charge and this is my way and this is how it's going to be. But we've got a Father too, and he'll scold us too if we've got it wrong.
Absolutely. And it's crazy that you said that, because you're right. That's a dictator house, and that's not good either.
No.
When you're my way or the highway, that's not okay either. It is our job to lay down the disciplines. One of the things that both my wife and I do is we sat down together, right? And we came up with what disciplines we could have for our children. Right. Okay. Came up with a big old list, and they're like, okay, so we have all these disciplines they can do. Next thing we need to do is, what happens when they disobey the discipline? What are we going to do? And then we have a list of rules. They're going to get a discipline if they go against this rule, and it's going to be different, between household to household, but we have our own set. But at least the kids can see them, and both my wife can agree. That way there is consistency, because I don't know about you, I got so much stuff going on, dude. My short-term memory is like it's non-existent. You know what I mean? I'll forget that I said something,
Right.
There's too many things going on. But when you have something written down and it's before you day and night, you're going to be consistent with that.
Absolutely.
So men and women, if you're listening right now, get a list of rules, get with your wife, like Chad said, and create some of those disciplines, create some of those household rules, write them down together. And then that way your kids can't say, well, I didn't know, and implement it that way and see how that works in your guys's training of your children and raising your children.
We have to lay out the expectation or they won't know. If we don't give them our expectations, there's no way. They're chasing an unreachable bar. They can't, they'll never get there. And we've got to be up front and lay it out for them in order for them to succeed. We have to help them become successful as children, which helps us to become more successful as parents.
Well, how many times have you ever had a boss where he never laid down expectations?
Right.
He just kind of let you run rampant, right? Or never gave anybody any credit or anything, and just whatever, you do what you do, boo, type of mentality, right? Right. Those bosses suck. And it's not good morale at all, No. Now imagine if we did the same thing in our own household.
Right.
Where everybody just runs amok and does whatever they want to do. It's going to be chaotic. It's not going to be
absolutely.
It's not going to be functional,
No. Not at all.
No. So,
not at all.
What are some of the most challenging situations that you've encountered during your career?
I think for me, probably the biggest challenge has been those times when I was working on the road and away from home for days, weeks at a time, and trying to maintain that family structure, maintain that sense of dad's still a part of this family. When you're gone for weeks at a time, you come home and things change around home. And I remember more times than one, my wife looking at me saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, it's how we've always done it." She said, "We don't do it like that anymore." Those things are tough, and it's hard to be that absent dad and walk back into your own home, but it really doesn't feel like yours anymore. That was probably the biggest challenge for me, and just leaving for those times, knowing I was going to be gone, and knowing how much I was going to miss my family, pulling out of the driveway, and I can remember times pulling out of the driveway, just to be blunt and honest about it, just bawling my eyes out because I missed my family already, and I'm right in front of my house still. uh, that was probably the hardest thing for me through the whole thing. Through my whole career, I always enjoyed, the work, being there and in the moment. But it's that time. What are you doing with your time after work? When you're gone, you're working on the road. That was another struggle. How do you? Because I wasn't part of the party crowd, so I didn't fit into that game. I wasn't a drinker. I wasn't a partier, and for me, that's one of those struggles. If I was going to be in an area for any time at all, I'd try to find a church that had a Wednesday night service or something that I could get that pick me up in the middle of the week. Go get a little bit of God's word, to help me get through that week or whatever it was. If I was gone on the weekends, I would absolutely try to find a church to attend and get in that service and stay grounded. But spending that time in the motel, productively, not on Facebook, not on social media. Of course, that hasn't been around for my whole career, but getting in God's word and spending that time with the Lord and in prayer, that was huge for me, because it was that grounding that I needed to keep me and my focus on what it needed to be on, and my family, and the nightly calls, trying to make it a point to talk to them all, every night, or at whatever time of day it was that worked out at that particular moment. But, I think those were the biggest struggles for me, was just maintaining the family while I was absent, and that role as an absent dad and a married but single mother those are tough roles. And they're tough roles to maintain that strength in your marriage throughout those times. And, if it hadn't been for God, I don't know, I don't know how we would have done it.
Man, I agree with you, brother, because I remember I had my wife tell me one time, she's like, "I feel like I'm dating you." Yeah. Because that's how it is. I like the way you put it. You're married but dating. And it's crazy. I'm married but single, is what you said.
Right.
And it's absolutely true, because they gotta carry the whole weight while we're gone.
And that's not easy.
No, it's not.
Because their disciplinarian's not there. And those kids will turn into heathens, like we were talking about earlier. Whether they mean to or not, they will. And they're going to try you, and they're going to test you. And man, I don't know if there's any moms out there, but God bless you. We love you, because you guys have a job that I don't know how you do it. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, it's definitely super hard, and as husbands, a part of our job is to protect our families, right? And part of that protection is being able to discern when our wives need a break, right?
Absolutely.
For me, I never had a goal, right? When I was on the road, it was just, I'm going to get through this job. I'm going to get through the next job. I'm going to get through the next. I'll be home soon. I'll be home soon, right? There was never an end game. And that's what my wife wanted. She wanted to know, okay, well, you're going to be gone for 6 months, and then that's it. Then you'll be home for 6 or whatever, right? For me, it was like, no, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go do this, or whatever, you know what I mean? Where I could work, you know?
Right.
So I never had a clear plan for her. And that caused a lot of stress for my wife, you know? Even when I hired on the utility, I was never home. I
Right.
mean, I'd sleep in my bed, but man, at the utility, you're lowest on the totem pole because you're the new hire. And guess what? You're getting all the crappy shifts. You're getting all the calls that no one wants, you know?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you're anything like me, you want to do a good job and you'll take those calls because you don't want to be that guy, you
Right.
know, instead of saying, nah, not today, you know what I mean? Or whatever, you know, you're still
Yeah.
trying to prove yourself, especially being a contractor in a utility world. You know what I mean? You're like, oh man, I
Right.
gotta show these guys, you know? So
Yeah.
it's
I
hard.
spent almost 3 years at a utility company myself, and was in a service truck running a service in a small rural community, and there was only 2 of us. So
Mhm.
he had call the first 15 days of the month, and I had it the second 15. Well, what nobody failed to tell, or what everybody failed to tell me when they hired me, was he also had 6 weeks of vacation. If you take off on Friday, that takes you off call for the weekend. And he just happened to go to a lot of cattle sales on Fridays. So
Hmm.
guess who got to carry a lot of that load? And it got to the point for us that our oldest daughter was young at the time,
Mhm.
and that was in the days of the pager. And my pager would go off, and before I would ever even call to see what was going on, she would be crying because she knew
Mhm.
daddy was leaving again. And I that kind of goes back to that exasperating your children. And if it's that hard on your children, you better be thinking about what you're doing and
Yeah.
find another way. Figure it out, because your children need you. There's a statistic out there that talks about salvation and the importance of the father and the husband in the home.
Mhm.
And I believe it's like 2.5%, if the child is the first to come to salvation, that the family will be saved. There's a 2.5% chance. And if it's the mother, it's like 17. But fellas, it's when the man is the first to come to salvation, there's a 93% chance that the family will follow in his footsteps.
Mhm.
And when you think about the importance, that fact, the importance of the father in the home
Mhm.
goes way beyond just that. Your importance is above and beyond in your children's lives and your
Mhm.
wife's life, more than you'll ever know or understand. They see things that you're doing, and they're watching every move that you make. And we don't realize how important we really are to that
Mhm.
family unit. The family being created by God, the
Mhm.
institution of the family being created by God, and how important we are in that institution. But he didn't set us up as the head of the household as a fluke. He
Yeah.
set us up for that because that's how important we are. He set us up as the head of the household and the leader of the family, the spiritual leader of our families, because he knew how important we were to our
Mhm.
families and the role that we played in them.
Amen. No, absolutely. Our influence knows no bound with our family. You know,
Not at all.
I have a good friend of mine, Pastor Mike Miguel. He was a mentor to me when I worked. We both were linemen, and then I was a foreman. Then he became a foreman, and he became a GF, and now he owns his own line company, right? And he's the sole
Mhm.
provider for a major utility. Anyhow, long story short, um, Pastor Mike, we were doing a Bible study. I used to go to his house every Tuesday, right? Now, while I was gone, because like you, I needed to break up the week. I didn't drink or anything like that. And I was like, man, if I'm by myself in this hotel room, you know what I mean? Probably not going to be good, So I was always
Right.
running, hiking, everything, right? And doing all kinds of stuff, working out. And anyhow, so Tuesday broke up the week by going to this guy's house for a Bible study. And I remember sitting there and it was already kind of cold. And he comes in out of nowhere, doesn't say hi or nothing. We're all sitting around the table, we're ready for it to start. And he opens up the sliding door in the back room, right? In the kitchen. And all the cold air rushes in immediately, totally changes the atmosphere in his house. And I'm like, man, what are you doing, dog? It's cold. And then he's like, oh, okay. And he closes it again. He's like, what did I just do? And I was like, oh, you just heated up the neighborhood. You know what I mean? It's cold. He's like, yeah, but what else did I do? I was like, I don't know. He's trying to get it out of me, right? I was like, I don't know, change the atmosphere. He's like, exactly. He's like, that's how much influence we have in our families. As fathers, we have the ability to change the atmosphere of our homes. And I was
Absolutely.
like, wow. And that was such a great analogy for me to see,
Right. It's, we just, and you can talk about it all day long, but until you are absent from that home for a given amount of time, you're really not going to realize fully how important you are until you return back to that home. When your children greet you at the door and you're all they want. They don't want anything else because daddy's home. You don't realize until you walk in that door for the first time how important you really are. And mama needed you just as much as those children do, but she's going to wait her turn. But don't forget mama, because she's just as important as your children. Yes, she's actually probably more important. My father-in-law was a pastor for 42 years. We sat under his ministry the first 23 years of our marriage, and he retired. But he used to, one of the things that he always used to teach in marital counseling before he would marry anybody was one of the big bullet points in his counseling was the most important thing as a husband or a wife that you can do for your children is to love your spouse. That's the most important thing that we can do for our children, because if they're not seeing it between mom and dad, how are we teaching them to love when they become adults? We're not doing our job by teaching them the right way to love and how to be that loving spouse, parent, mother, father, whatever role it is that you're in at that given moment. Be it who you're with, we got to remember our wives. They're the most important thing. Short of my relationship with God, my wife is the most important relationship I have, and it has to be that way. Because if my kids are more important than my wife, it's just not going to work. Or I'm going to have a dysfunctional marriage. But if my wife and I's marriage is functional and it's where it ought to be, then our relationship with our children is also going to be on the right level playing field where it should be.
No, I agree with you. We're talking about wives and, we're talking about fathers and husbands and how important our role is. I was talking with someone the other day, and he came to me and he talked about how he didn't come to the Lord until he saw his wife. Like, she never heckled him. She never undermined his authority, even when he was wrong, right? She questioned it, of course, because, whenever you're going against God's will, of course, we even said, even in our ministry, you know what I mean? If there's any type of abuse that's taking place or anything like that, no, you need to say something, right? That's not God's will. But there's a scripture that says, that Peter talks about, says, the wives likewise be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without word may be won by the conduct of their wives. It's that conduct that gives evidence of the working of the gospel in the life of a believer, right? Absolutely. So because of her being obedient, because of her being the good wife, even though she didn't agree with this guy, even though certain things he was doing wasn't for the best interest of the family, but through her chaste conduct, she was able to win him over to Christ. And that's what he said. He's like, I know without a doubt that there is a God, because there's no way that this woman, who is a godly woman, would have put up with all the stuff I was doing.
Right.
And because of her conduct, he was able to receive, receive Jesus as Lord and Savior. And now their whole family has received Jesus,
Absolutely.
So what I'm getting at is our wives have an important role, right?
Absolutely.
Within the family dynamic. It's not just the fathers, it's our wives as well. And no point in time am I telling wives or anybody, any women listening here, that you're supposed to be subservient and if you're going through abuse or anything like that, that you just got to take it. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that you have to be your husband's cheerleader, right? When me and my wife were having marriage problems and stuff like that, one of the marriage counselors, she's a Christian counselor, she told my wife, she's like, how are you speaking to your husband? My wife was like, oh, I did this, blah, 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 blah. And the lady's like, okay, well, if you expect, if you talk to him like a hole, expect to get the a-hole.
Yep.
If you want him to act like the king and the leader of your home, you need to start speaking to him that way, right? And man, that made a world of difference. It made a world of difference.
We don't realize how influential our own actions are sometimes in those relationships, be it with your children, or your spouse, your wife, whatever it is. Man, if we're not, I went through some, without going into great depth and detail, I went through a time last year where the Lord was just drawing me nearer. And one of the things was, over the last 25 years, I prayed and prayed for God to change this or that about my wife. And man, he said, you asked me to change this because you can't change her. He said, why are you wanting to change the woman that I created perfect for you? You never asked me what you needed to do to change yourself.
Wow.
And man, I mean, just broke me. And over the next few months after that, he just began to show me, my prayer that was always every day was, show me what you want me to see. What show me my wife through your eyes, and show me how you want me to love her. And I'm telling you, I went through a time where I washed more dishes and did more loads of laundry than I'd done in our whole marriage in a matter of span of just a handful of months. But I saw a total change in my wife because she saw me loving her the way she needed to be loved. And it was so beautiful to watch that transformation happen. It was such a simple thing. I needed to change me. I didn't think so. Yeah. We get in that mindset that we're good, or I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm providing for my family, and I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. I'm going to church, but what are we doing as men to love and take care of our wives, and to provide for them their needs, no matter what that need is? There's so many things out there that there's so many different love languages out there that we don't all need the same. We don't all have the same love language, and your wife's needs are not the same as your needs. Your needs are not going to be the same as her needs, and they're not going to be the same at the same time most of the time. But we've got to learn how to read our wives and look into them beyond the surface of what they are and what they need to get the fullness out of that relationship that we can get.
That's funny that you said that, Chad, because that was one of my biggest issues, like within our marriage, is I knew what I liked, like what my love language was. Like I liked acts of service. So for me, her showing me love was her cleaning the house, her doing stuff for me, her doing the laundry, her cooking. To me, that showed that she loved me, right? So I would do the same thing because that's how I received love. I made the mistake of thinking that's how she received love.
Right.
So it caused this big old rift in our marriage because here I am thinking, man, I'm going to show my wife I love her. I'm going to do this. I'm going to wash the dishes. I'm going to clean. I'm going to vacuum, all this stuff. And that was not her love language. So I was spinning my wheels, dude.
Spinning your wheels and making her feel like she wasn't doing the things she was supposed to be doing.
Exactly. She took an offense to it, and she's like, man, this guy thinks his house is dirty. I must not be doing enough for him. You know what I mean? It wasn't that at all. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until we got some wisdom and understanding that I was like,
Sure.
okay, that's not her love language. I need to start figuring this stuff out. You know what I mean? Because here I am getting frustrated thinking I'm showing her I love her by doing all this stuff. And that's not how she receives love. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
I think that will help out a lot of our listeners on here. You know, if you're really interested in cultivating your marriage and sowing into your marriage, you know, I would suggest that book, the Five Love Languages. That's a
Mhm.
great book, you know, and that really helped us out, you know, tremendously as far as that goes, you know.
Sure. And our wives, being married for 25 years, my wife is not the same woman that I married 25 years ago.
Nor
I
should
have
she
to
should
learn.
be,
What's
right?
that?
And nor should she should be, right?
Right. Right. And and we have to learn. We have to get to know our spouse on a daily basis sometimes. We all change. We're not the same men that we were when we got married.
No.
And and our wives have got to learn us in the same way.
Mhm.
Um and that there's the difference between men and women is so huge, vast, and far apart in so many cases that we get lost in that why don't they think like me mentality.
Mhm.
Why she used to love it when I did this, why doesn't she like it now?
Mm.
And we all change, we all evolve over time, and our needs and our love languages change.
Yeah.
It's not a marriage, and family is not always an easy thing, but
Mm.
it's definitely not a passive action to be
Mhm.
married. You've got to be very uh, aggressive as far as learning and remembering and figuring your spouse out,
Mhm.
because just like you know we see in the trade, everything's changing, and it changes at a rapid pace sometimes. and
Yeah.
and our families and our marriages are the same way, and that being absent from the home, working on the road, makes that even tougher.
Mhm. Now, what do you say, Chad, to the guy who's actually, you know, working on the road? He has to, right? Because there may not be any union work near him or whatever, so he's got to
Sure.
travel for work. What do you say to him? Like, what would be some advice for that guy who's listening right now? Like, what would you suggest he needs to do as far as being a better, more present father and husband in his family's life?
One of the things for me that I always tried to do was,
Hmm.
if I had to work out of town and had to be on the road, I always tried to find a job that was within driving distance where I could come home at least on the weekends.
Okay.
Try to be there close where you can be home. Don't ever fail to make that phone call at night. Don't let don't let your wife go the evening without hearing from you, and make her wonder. Idle mind tends to wander, and where's she going to think that you're at? What's she going to think you're doing?
Yeah.
Call her, love on her, make sure she knows that you're thinking about her. Tell her what you're doing. Don't
Hmm.
hide things from her. Tell her what you're doing. Tell her where you're going. Tell her who you're with, where you're going to be, when you're
Hmm.
going to be back. And it's not a matter of she doesn't trust you. It's that wandering mind thing.
Yes.
What and that can create its own set of problems when
Hmm.
when we leave the mind to wander. Um,
Mm.
spend the time. It's not like you're not telling her that these things because she doesn't trust you. You're telling her these things and where you're going and who you're with and what you're going to do, so that she does trust you, so
Yeah.
that she does know where you're at. I like to know where my wife's at.
Hmm.
I mean, and I think it's only fair. It's not because she's a possession of mine, but because I love her and I care about her and I care
Yeah.
about her well being.
Mm. I like that.
We have to, you know, for me, like I said earlier, when we were talking earlier, for me, a big thing was finding that church wherever I was at to get that midweek pickup.
Yeah.
And you know, in our industry, in our trade, that's not the cool thing to do most of the time, and it's not the popular thing to do, and you're probably not going to get a lot of the guys on your crew to go with you. But you know what? I don't need their approval
Yeah.
to live the life that God's called me to live. I don't need someone to tell me I'm cool or I'm not based on what I choose to do in my own time. The only approval I need is from my Heavenly Father and from my family.
Mm-hmm.
As long as my family and my Heavenly Father is happy with me, that's all that matters in this life.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Being cool is overrated.
yeah. Well, I think too, man, like when you're a true leader, you don't need to follow the it crowd,
Right.
right? You stand on your own 2 feet, right? And
Absolutely.
I try to teach my kids that as well. You don't need to go with the crowd. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that's important that a father needs to teach his children, right? And lead by example as well, like you are doing, right? I did the same thing. I didn't go out drinking, you know, not because I couldn't, but just because I chose to. I
Right.
chose not to be drinking because everything in my life prior to all this, everything bad in life that I had experienced had to deal with me drinking. I didn't know how to control myself.
Right.
you know, and so I made that conscious decision to not drink. I haven't drank in 17 years. But
Hallelujah.
yeah, it's crazy. That's a whole story in itself. But can you share some experiences or moments that you had as a father and how they impacted your perspective on fatherhood, Chad, if you don't mind?
You know, our oldest daughter's 23,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a 19-year-old son in college, and our baby is 18. She's a senior in high school this year. And so, man, I could go back way, way, way back. But, you know, the things that we do and the things that we allow our kids to do with us and the things that we do. When our oldest was really small, we'd been in town. Her and I's big thing. I was a huge John Wayne fan, and Sunday afternoons when we get home from church,
Mm-hmm.
Mom usually went and took a nap, and me and Sis would sit on the couch and watch John Wayne. And she loved John Wayne as much as I did, even as a little bitty girl. We were coming home from town one day, and this semi cut us off, and I said, "Dad gum, that makes me mad." And she said, "Get your gun, Daddy." I said, "What?" She said, "Get your gun, Daddy." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It's what John Wayne would do." And my wife looked at me and she said, "No more John Wayne for her." Just there's all kinds of things that we see that we experience that throughout raising our children and our families growing that mold and make our families what they are.
Yeah.
But we went through, after my father-in-law retired, we went through a time of about a year and a half where we didn't have a home church, and we were searching. Things just didn't work out, where we were at. And sometimes when a pastor retires, the family just needs to move on because it's not their church anymore. And
Yeah.
it's just better sometimes to do so. And we spent, like I said, better part of a year and a half searching. And it wasn't until just recently I realized how much of an impact I had on my family through that time, because we got to a point where the family was just kind of giving up. They didn't know, not that they were giving up on God, but they didn't know where to go, what we were doing, and my oldest daughter, crying with tears in her eyes to me one day, came to me. She said, "I just want to thank you for being that rock and that strong one that stayed in there and continued to get up week after week and say, 'Come on, we're going. We're going
Yeah.
somewhere. We're going to go try somewhere till we find home. We're going somewhere.'" like I said, that's how influential we are as fathers. She said, our family wouldn't be back together in church today. She said, I don't think if it hadn't been for you and being strong and staying strong through that. So, I mean, man, stay strong for your family. Stay strong in your beliefs and your whatever your family is so important. Whatever you're doing to keep your family going in those directions, man, just be that strong, that anchor, that rock that they need. Keep them moving in that right direction.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you.
Be the leader.
And that's what we need these days is a leader. We need men to stand up into their roles, to lead their families, and to lead them right. We need that more than ever. Our country needs it.
Sure.
There's something that I said at the Lineman's Rodeo that really caught a lot of attention with a lot of the hands that are walking around is we're the backbone of America. We need to start being the backbone for our families.
Absolutely.
But with that being said, Chad, our time is done now, brother. How can someone get a hold of you and reach out to you if they have any questions or anything like that? I want to give you the opportunity to share that if you will.
Yeah, man, I'm on Facebook. I not big on any other real forms of social media. Obviously I'm on Messenger through Facebook, but man, my phone is always open to help whoever, whenever. Phone number 660-525-7959. If you're in West Central Missouri, anywhere around Clinton, Missouri, man, I'd love to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. Whatever it is, if you're in the area and you're in need, give me a holler. I'm always there for you. We've got an awesome growing church here in Clinton, Missouri called Life Ministries. We love to love on people. And like I said, if you're in town on a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning, come join us and we'd love to have you.
Well, right on, Chad. Thank you so much for coming on here and taking your time to bring hope to our listeners. That's what we're called to do through this show, to really share God's love, to Absolutely. All the hands out there that are putting their lives on the line to create a better life for their families,
Yep.
So thank you. We appreciate you, brother. We'll be talking soon.
Thanks, David.